Hi, my name is Christine DiCarlo, and I'm with the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine, or AACOM, and I'm joined today by Jason DiLorenzo. Jason is the founder of Doctors Without Quarters, a medical student loan organization, and he has also more recently founded PSLFjobs, a public service loan forgiveness jobs platform and resource. AACOM's Ed to Med campaign is currently prioritizing the protection and preservation of public service loan forgiveness, so we're very excited to share Jason's knowledge and expertise today with our advocates. Thank you, Jason, for speaking with me.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited about the Ed to Med campaign and excited to be here as well. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jason. So you have founded Doctors Without Quarters to support health profession students as they navigate their federal loan options. What motivated you to also launch PSLFjobs?
Oh, that's a great question. Of the thousands of doctors that have come through our ecosystem at Doctors Without Quarters since 2015, when I started the organization, about 80% of these folks were public service loan forgiveness candidates, and still are in many cases. I mean, the reason that PSLF is so prolific within medical graduates is because residency hospitals are typically 501c3 nonprofit organizations, teaching hospitals where you would do your residency and your fellowship. So whether or not a physician was going to be working in the public service sector, once they transition to practice, they certainly all have that option. And we wanted to make sure that they were positioned for PSLF and to maximize that substantial savings in many cases, as you know. And I wanted to have a jobs platform for them to be able to know that they were looking at public service loan forgiveness qualified jobs only, because a lot of them were seeking out the loan forgiveness and wanted to work for qualifying organizations. And with job boards today, you just don't see a lot of the employers posting on jobs, even if they're qualified PSLF employers, actually advertising that. So our goal is to change that.
Oh, great. So making it easier to connect the PSLF job seekers with those positions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what types of resources or information can a user expect to find on the PSLF job platform?
Yeah. So excellent question. I think the first thing we are, first and foremost, is a jobs platform. So we are aggregating jobs that live on other job boards that we know are public service loan forgiveness qualified. And we will also be working with employers directly to advertise their jobs on our platform. I think we also, as a goal, want to bring simplicity to what is otherwise sort of a complex, evolving, and often misunderstood or misinterpreted in the media program. For example, the word is out now that a lot of PSLF candidates are being denied their applications, and that there's some interpretation of that is that the government isn't honoring this. I see actually quite the opposite. Anyone who's followed this like we have, Christine, over the past several years knows that it's only been just past 10 years now since the government nationalized student loans. And so if you have direct student loans, those loans are eligible for public service loan forgiveness if you're in the right kind of repayment plan and you work for the right kind of employer. It was not so simple prior to July of 2010, when the private marketplace was competing in the federal lending marketplace. So now things are more simple. We're trying to bring simplicity to that and create a marketplace for the 1.4 million individuals that are already pursuing PSLF. And I think one of the things that we also will do for borrowers that goes beyond just what a jobs board is help people determine PSLF eligibility. So we have a calculator that will help an individual based on their projected salary and their overall student loan debt calculate or estimate how much loan forgiveness savings would be available to them. And so that's the value we're bringing to individual borrowers. But it's a jobs board bringing simplicity with a calculator available. Those are the three main core offerings.
Oh, great. Okay. Those all sound like very helpful resources.
Thank you.
So how would you describe PSLFjobs' intended audience? Is this just anyone interested in pursuing PSLF?
I would say yes. I think there's probably a minimum debt amount that would make someone a PSLF candidate. I like to say, if I'm trying to simplify it, which it's not always so simple, but if you have a level of student loan debt that is at or above what you are earning or planning to earn in terms of your salary, then there's a good chance that there will be significant or at least meaningful savings from the public service loan forgiveness program. It's the sort of unfavorable, if you will, for lack of a better term, debt to income ratios when it comes to student loan debt and your salary or your household income that drives savings. And so those who have lower levels of debt and higher incomes, whether or not they're working in public service, they may not be candidates for the PSLF program. So I think our intended audience would start with anyone who has, say, $35,000 or $40,000 of student loan debt, and then above. We've got Doctors Without Quarters as clients that together are both, for example, physicians and have $1 million or more of cumulative student loan debt. They should be looking for PSLF qualified jobs.
Yes, certainly. That would be a lot of savings.
Yeah.
So speaking of this community in particular, how can PSLF jobs help osteopathic medical and health profession students, this little community that we're talking about?
Absolutely. Well, in the osteopathic medical realm, as you probably know, the average medical school borrowing or debt is somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000 on average, depending on the program. And if you're including accrued interest, it is not uncommon for us at Doctors Without Quarters to see debt levels above $400,000 for many graduates. And so that tends to be higher than what we see in the MD space. We also see osteopathic doctors indicating more as a percentage, those who are in medical school, indicating an interest in working in primary care, where we see more public service loan forgiveness qualified job opportunities. So first and foremost, we want to bring job opportunities as PSLF jobs to individual osteopathic doctors. The higher the debt, the more valuable a PSLF qualified job is. So we want to have a robust platform of jobs available to them. And then, of course, Doctors Without Quarters, as we have done and will continue to do, manage individual debt portfolios to make sure that they're maximizing the savings opportunity. So that's how we help medical graduates, osteopathic graduates specifically.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you also for highlighting the point about osteopathic physicians tending to go into primary care. We also know they often go into rural and medically underserved areas. So we do think the PSLF program is super important to make sure that physicians are incentivized to practice in these areas where they're really needed. So we think that's really important.
Yes, absolutely.
So what advice would you give to a health profession student borrower who may be interested in PSLF?
So that's interesting. So you're saying a health profession student loan borrower. So we're outside of even osteopathic graduates, but we pharmacy or physician assistants or other health professions. When you graduate, and particularly if you're a physician going into some medical training, residency, fellowship, and we know that the debt levels are high and the incomes during training are modest, and they necessitate payment relief. So that payment relief best comes through the income-driven repayment plans today. Historically, if we look back 10 plus years ago, physicians were in training, they were using deferment or forbearance. And when the debt levels were half or less of what they are today, and the interest rates went to as low as 2% during the 2008 economic crisis that we went through, that made sense. But now that we have the income-driven repayment plans available in a more complex and often generous forgiveness environment, there's no reason for borrowers today to be choosing for deferment or forbearance when they have these income-driven repayment plans available to them that do qualify you for forgiveness. So I would tell every graduate that has meaningful student loan debt to avoid deferment or forbearance and use an income-driven repayment plan where payment relief is needed or forgiveness is available.
Yeah, that's a very important point. We know
Yeah.
from the osteopathic side, residents, MD side too, your salary is much lower than it will eventually become. So it's important to take advantage of the IDR plans while you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they call in some circles, it's the residency loophole. You get to pay so little on your student loans that with high debt levels that, and you count that time towards the 10 years for public service loan forgiveness. It really becomes generous savings for physicians specifically.
Definitely. So Jason, I'm curious, how many people have you helped place into PSLF jobs so far?
Yes. So Doctors Without Quarters has consulted about 7,000 physicians to date with our fee-based service. So this equals but nearly $2 billion of federal student loan debt. And like I said, between 75% and 80% of these graduates are pursuing PSLF at least during their training, because like I'm saying, you almost accidentally qualify for public service loan forgiveness if you're using the plan that already makes sense, an income driven repayment plan, and you're working certainly full time as residents do in qualifying organizations. So like about 75-80% of these folks are PSLF qualified. This is the job, this is the cohort, if you will, of individuals that we want to be introducing to PSLF qualified jobs. And I think our estimate is, and this is an estimate, I haven't done the exact stats on this, but that about half of our clients are going to choose a PSLF qualified job when they transition. Some were going to go into the private sector anyway, but it certainly made sense for them to position for PSLF by using an IDR, income driven repayment plan anyway. But that, our database is going to feature more PSLF candidates than the average physician graduate who's transitioning to practice when student loan debt isn't considered. We probably see somewhere between around 30% of physicians practicing today are working in a nonprofit or government or public service environment. So our statistics for our borrowers are significantly higher.
Yeah, that's interesting. AACOM
Yeah.
does surveys of our graduating seniors, and for the 2019-2020 graduating class, 80% of the respondents who'd intended to go into a loan forgiveness program indicated they would be interested in PSLF. So that 80% figure sounds in line with what you were saying too.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense.
So can you walk us through the process of, the steps you take when you have someone that's seeking a PSLF job?
Yeah. So, well, I'll start with where it starts for the database that I have managed, which is Doctors Without Quarters database. And again, I'm intimately familiar with the loan forgiveness and repayment plan process for doctors specifically. The first step is to identify if public service loan forgiveness is going to drive any savings based on your projected individual or joint household income and what your overall federal student loan debt is. So if you're not a PSLF candidate, best to know that as soon as possible so that you can erase this from your economic considerations of your job opportunities. And then where it does become meaningful or even significant and substantial and a needle mover in terms of where you want to determine, like you want to transition to a nonprofit job because you're going to save $300,000 in out-of-pocket savings on student loans. There's a lot of osteopathic doctors with that situation. You want to identify that as soon as possible, and then be introduced to employers who can facilitate that for you. Ideally, they are aware that you are pursuing public service loan forgiveness. They are factoring it into how they incentivize you because PSLF can be a recruitment and retention tool for nonprofit employers. We don't like to see student loan bonuses that have to go straight to a loan servicer and pay down balances when that money could come into the individual doctor and they're going to get federal loan forgiveness. So want to make sure that those incentives are aligned appropriately. So we get that deep into the process of PSLF pursuit as we start talking about now consulting with potential employers. So again, identify the savings opportunity and either highlight or dismiss PSLF as soon as possible, and then manage the student loan repayment process and plan to continue to maximize savings. That's what Doctors Without Quarters does, and then continue to update the individual borrowers on the marketplace and present job opportunities. That's where PSLFjobs then fits into the puzzle.
Okay, great. So that makes sense, that whole trajectory.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
and now I'm also wondering, we're in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, and I was just curious to hear from you about this, but have you seen any increase in interest in public service jobs since the pandemic
Ooh.
has begun?
That's a good question. If I had any control over that outcome, I would say yes, I would like to see an increase in public service job. We haven't had this high of employment as we've seen this year since the Great Depression, or I think it even eclipsed that at one point. And so a lot of people that are out of work right now are significant borrowers of student loan debt. So we'd certainly like to put opportunities to become debt-free, tax-free in 10 years in front of borrowers who are unemployed right now or looking to change jobs. I would say what I've definitely seen is that the value of public service loan forgiveness is increased because of what the CARES Act did in terms of pausing interest accrual on all federal student loans and then also stopping payments for everyone. Those zero payments count towards public service loan forgiveness. So if you're in a nonprofit environment or you choose to get into a nonprofit environment, as long as this CARES Act stimulus is in place, that time is counted towards public service loan forgiveness. And as you might understand, if you pay zero for X number of months or years, that's going to leave more to be forgiven at tax-free at the 10-year mark. So we're seeing PSLF value increase substantially due to the stimulus package, the CARES Act specifically.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that too. That's a very interesting and important point. Definitely increase the value of PSLF.
It
Right
does.
now. So looking ahead to the elections, I'm not sure if we will publish this blog post after the elections actually take place, but as we're speaking today, the elections are still in the future. So I would just like to hear your thoughts on this as well. How do you
Yeah.
think the upcoming elections might impact the PSLF program?
Well, let me preface my answer by saying partisanship aside, I don't want to play
Yeah.
that game, but I've seen all the proposals and we've seen many of them from, I think Elizabeth Warren and Schumer had a recent proposal or intention to try to forgive $50,000 of federal student loan debt blanket for all borrowers. That's on the more generous end of what we've seen. And the Trump budget proposal that came out, the most recent budget proposal, intended to eliminate public service loan forgiveness. I'm sure you've seen that in past years. So who knows where we'll actually land? Probably somewhere in the middle, depending on who gets elected in the next week, or hopefully it's sorted out within a week. But the PSLF program specifically, were changes to happen to the federal student loan environment, they would impact future borrowers, not those that are current borrowers. So in other words, and I'm sure borrowers have read their promissory notes cover to cover, but it's public service loan forgiveness is in your master promissory notes. Therefore, it would be something that would be very difficult, practically impossible for the government to sweep that rug out from under you. You could make the case that you went to school or took a particular job because this was available to you in your contract, your master promissory note with the federal government, the Department of Education. And so there's a 10-year runway here, at least, with public service loan forgiveness, even if it were to be eliminated next week for future borrowers. And in fact, I was talking to someone yesterday about the prospect of, if you're halfway through school, right? Let's say you got an M2 osteopathic student who has got the first 2 years of medical school with public service loan forgiveness. It's probably, or at least maybe even likely, that they would need to be able to borrow loans, or at least have the option to borrow loans on the same terms throughout the rest of their program. So 10 years runway with PSLF, I would say, is the minimum that we're talking about here. And I don't think that the outcome of the election is going to impact that.
Yeah, thanks also for highlighting the being grandfathered in aspect. Yeah. I know that would be definitely reassuring for people who are currently enrolled in the program to hear that.
Let's get this message out to all who are enrolled, because I think it's a concern that I'd hate to see people not participating because of that fear. There's efforts by through the temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness program to even forgive debt for people who made mistakes because they got bad information from their servicers. And I think we had discussed this, but the amount of debt that's been forgiven year over year has actually grown about 3.5 times. So last year around this time, we saw close to 100 million, maybe $80 million of public service loan forgiveness granted. Now that number with both PSLF and temporary expanded is in excess of $300 million. And there's 117 billion in the queue for forgiveness over the course of the next 10 years. So this number is going to very quickly get into the billions and increase exponentially over the next few years. And so hopefully just that alone will start to provide relief to borrowers who are pursuing it and maybe scared off by what they're seeing in the media today.
Right. Yeah, that does segue very well into my last question. I just wanted to highlight on your PSLFjobs blog, you recently highlighted the U.S. Department of Education has reported a 350% increase in PSLF loan forgiveness. And that was from June 2019 to June 2020. So within that year.
Yep.
And then, yeah, as you said, as more borrowers are successfully receiving this tax-free loan forgiveness through PSLF, it sounds like, in your opinion, that does make the future of the program more secure. Would you say that's accurate?
You've got more and more borrowers who are reliant on this program. They've made decisions to go to school and certainly made career decisions based on its availability. That's going to just make it more difficult for the government to pull out the carpet from underneath these individuals. There would be huge class action liability for were that to happen. I don't see any of the proposals targeting those currently participating in these programs, in this program specifically.
Right. And
so I kind of feel like we've already reached the point of no return for current borrowers. Yeah.
Right. And it highlights the importance of continued advocacy for future borrowers. So
Absolutely.
Our EdToMed campaign is definitely working hard to make sure that this program remains available to everyone who's yet to enter into it so that, they can, one, get the benefits of loan forgiveness, but two, also if they want to practice in these primary care underserved positions, that they're being incentivized to do it and the financial aspect doesn't have to come into the equation. So,
well, hopefully me nerding out with some of these statistics for you helps build the case that you guys are making, and it's a very good one. And in any way I can support you, I hope that you will never hesitate to ask.
Yeah, Jason, thank you so much. I think this information has been very beneficial and helpful and certainly important for the EdToMed audience to hear. And I just want to say, if you are an EdToMed advocate watching today and you'd like more information about PSLFjobs, I encourage you to visit the resource online at PSLFjobs.com and definitely take advantage of the jobs board and the other services that Jason has talked about. And also just want to reiterate, your advocacy is so important to protecting the PSLF program for future borrowers. So please continue to speak out on this issue. And you can stay connected with EdToMed by following us. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and you can also visit our website at edtomed.com. And Jason, thank you again. It's really been a true pleasure speaking with you today and really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. If I may make one more shameless plug for those who are struggling with their repayment strategy right now and haven't really dug in with all that's what's going on with the CARES Act and all that. The Doctors Without Quarters fee-based service can be very helpful in terms of making sure everything's consolidated, you're in the right repayment plan, running numbers for married filing jointly versus separately. So whether you're getting that information out from other resources that exist or you want an advocate in your corner, make sure that you're understanding the marketplace as it evolves, and Doctors Without Quarters can certainly be a resource for that as well, if you don't mind my saying.
Absolutely not. No, another very, very good resource.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you again, Jason.
Yes, thank you. Have a nice afternoon.
You too.
Bye.